Well, we're really excited because obviously today is our 4-year anniversary, and 4 years ago we started this thing in this very building. We've actually met in 3 different places, and we found our way back to this building. And let me tell you, I love being here in the middle, in the heart of Old Town Clovis, and being here in the heart of Clovis. Obviously, we started this church to reach 2 communities, Fresno and Clovis. It just so happens that we meet in Clovis, but we also have impact in Fresno. I want to tell you a story. I was about 13 years old, okay? And so we lived in a little community out by Dry Creek Elementary at that time, and the neighborhood I was living in was pretty quiet, except for on this particular night. There was Skywatch. You guys know Skywatch, the police helicopters, and they were circling our neighborhood, and they had the floodlights going and the loudspeaker from the helicopter going, right? And they're giving instructions to someone. Don't worry, not me. I'm not the central character here. And they're looking, and there are squad cars everywhere. They've blocked off the streets, and there are police up and down the street, and they're looking for a man. And the man was one of our neighbors, not directly in our neighborhood, but lived behind our neighborhood. And I don't really know what transpired, but they came a-knocking, and he went a-running. So allegedly, something happened, and I don't know how all that went down and everything. But I do know that he was on the run, and they were looking for him. And I have never seen such a search party. The technology, the pursuit, the relentlessness of the Clovis Police Department was out there, and they were trying to find this guy. And so I'm 13. This is fun, right? I'm 13. This is fun. 37-year-old Micah would take out his phone and look at, the Nextdoor app and see what all my neighbors had to say and what information they had on this and lock the doors and the windows. But 13-year-old Micah didn't have social media, and 13-year-old Micah loved that kind of adventure and, got my blood pumping a little bit. So I want to be a part of that search party, desperately. So here I am. I'm peeking out the window, right? My dad, he's like, let's go out. I'm like, let's go out, follow my dad out, right? Go down to the front of my yard. There's an officer right there asking him questions. What's going on? He's filling us in a little bit. And they're looking for this guy. They're in and out everybody's backyard. And I'm just got my eyes peeled, right? I'm going to catch this guy, right? 13. I got nothing, But anyway, so I happen to look across the street. And over my neighbor's fence, his head pops up. And then goes down. I'm like, there he is! And they all go running, right? And I was so pumped. And at that point, my dad said, okay, too close, let's go. And so we go inside and we hide out and until they, things settle down and they're gone. The search party's gone. But I was just so impressed with the amount of technology, the amount of pursuit, everything it took for them to find this guy. In my head, I was making up what was going on in the helicopter. Man, they probably got the infrared thing out, and they're looking around. They can't find him because he's under a cow. I'm making up these excuses of how he's covering his tracks and all this stuff, right? Because there's a field next to the house, and I'm like, or he's laying by the patties or something, and it's still fresh, so can't really see his body signature. But that's in my head, 13-year-old Micah, that's what's going on in my head. So I just thought the search party was awesome. But the thing that really stood out to me was the urgency with which they searched. There was such an urgency, and I understand there was a danger involved, and so they wanted to make sure that they caught this guy as quickly as possible. But there was such an urgency in them to get this done, to get this guy caught, to make sure this community was safe. On October 5th, we'll fast forward a little bit, 2014, we started TwoCities.Church with an urgency, an equal urgency, not because of the danger of an individual in our community, but because of the danger of apathy towards the gospel message of Jesus, the danger of people, and particularly younger people, leaving the church at a very fast rate. We started with an urgency because there were 10 people, there were 5 couples, and we said, hey, let's do this together. We're in this together. We want to start something together because we love one another and we love our 2 cities and we want to see as many people meet Jesus as possible. And so we started with a list of names. We created a Google Doc that we shared, and at the top it says, it's still there, it's in It's in my Google Drive. I can still pull it up. At the top it says, enter names at your own risk, right? Because it was like, okay, these are the people that we want to reach. And some of those names are in this room. And some of those names have come through this room. And they found a relationship with Jesus. And they got reconnected maybe with a faith that they had lost or walked away from. And they found another place at another local church. And that's still a win for us. Because really it's connecting people to Jesus, right? And so we played a role in that. And we were a part of connecting them with Jesus. There was something in the air on that first day that I can't quite describe. In fact, I remember when I was speaking, my heart was just like this. Like I couldn't stop it. It was just so fast. I was out of breath the whole time. And I remember someone coming up to me afterwards who was there to support us, and he goes, I had no idea how painful it would be for me to watch that. I was like, thank you. I really appreciate that. And we had high hopes, and we still have high hopes, and we have high dreams of what could be and will be for Two Cities Church, but beyond that, our two cities and how we can impact our cities. One of the things, and one of the things that has come up that has become difficult over time is the innate part of us, the part of us that continues to, because we're human, continues to look at other places and see what they're doing and at times be jealous, or at times be like, man, I wish we could do that, or things like that. And this we call the comparison trap. Because once we start comparing ourselves to somebody else, we're off mission. We're off mission. In fact, a pastor, his name's Craig Gershell, he said this recently. He said this in a message and then again at a leadership summit conference this past week. He said this: the fastest way to kill something special is to compare it to something else. So I want to encourage you, if you're a part of our core, don't worry about anything else. Don't worry about anyone else. God's called us to something very specific, and he's called other people to things very specific. And part of our calling is to reach people who are far from God. What that means is oftentimes we will become a transitionary place for them. They will come in and they will find a growing relationship with Jesus, and sometimes they'll go somewhere else, and sometimes they'll move. But we have played a clear role in their life, and we are called to do something very specific here. And so we don't need to worry about that. We don't need to worry about those sorts of things. We don't need to compare ourselves to other organizations and churches which are doing amazing things in our community, and we applaud them. God has called us to do a very specific thing in our communities. We are not comparable. In fact, I wrote this out. I said, we are a vibrant community of people seeking to introduce as many individuals to Jesus as possible. That's it. We're a vibrant community. How can I say we're a vibrant community? Well, if you're involved in our community groups, if you help us in volunteering out in the community, you would see the vibrancy at this church. I want to thank those of you who are committed and involved in that level, because you bring such life to what we do here. And without you, it wouldn't be as full of life. So I want to thank you for that. And leading people and seeking to introduce people into a relationship with Jesus, a growing relationship with Jesus, happens one person at a time. One person at a time. At least it does here. Maybe at other places, they can do hundreds of people at a time. And this, what God has called us to do, happens one person at a time. Because that person has immense value. Every guest that walks through our doors, we realize it could be their first time in a church setting. It could be their first time in a long time at a church setting. Many people walk in with church hurt and past and some sort of pain involved in their church involvement in the past. Or many people come in with questions and they're not sure about anything. They just want a little bit of comfort. We're here. We want people to come with their questions. And nobody's judged for any of that. We want to be that kind of a place. So let me remind you of our mission here yet again. Okay, I said it at the beginning. I said it again. Let me say it one more time. Our mission is to lead people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. Now, what's interesting about this is as we started this church, culture has continued to change, and the way people kind of view church has changed. And so when we started this, we pretty much said, the average person attends church like twice a month. That's the average person. Many of you are above average, so give yourself a round of applause for that. You're just not average people. Like, you don't get C's. You're like B's and A's, A pluses. So, but in today's world, not 4 years ago, 4 years later, the average person probably who is committed to a local church gets into that community once every 4 weeks, once every 6 weeks. That's just a national trend, okay? So people, the way they engage with the church has changed, and it's not always on a Sunday. It's not always in a service environment. We recognize that because we absolutely know that. Those of us who are here on Sunday absolutely know that. We know that to the core of our being. So part of how we need to view things and part of how we need to move forward is understand that it's not all about attendance. See, our vision from the beginning was, our vision is to create a church community that unchurched people would love to attend. Attend. We're going to take that word attend out because it's not typically how things work today. Now, we still want attendance, still want people to come to service. It's absolutely a critical part of a church community, is coming together as a family and worshiping our God together and learning together and applying those principles in our life. That's absolutely part of what we do week in and week out. However, our vision needs to change just a little bit. We want to create a church community that unchurched people would love to engage with. The unchurched people would love to engage with. That's why we do more and more things in our community like Clovis Fest. That's why we're doing this community concert. That's why we're working with Habitat for Humanity. That's why we're going to do a service with some people down at the Fresno Rescue Mission around Christmas. Because we want to be valued in our community. We want people to say, I'm glad they're here. I'm glad they're a part of our cities. In fact, our cities would not be as good without TwoCities.Church around. That's what we want. And so part of that is making sure we're connected in the community in different ways, in strategic ways, but also we want to invite people to engage with us in those community events who aren't even ever going to be in this room. But they're going to rub shoulders with you, and they're going to be next to you, and they're going to learn something about the love of Jesus just by being with you. And I think that's pretty fantastic. So we just want to shift that just a little bit. Absolutely, we're still going to attend together, be together, gather together. That's part of what we do. But that's not going to be the hill that we die on, right? That's not going to be the one thing that defines us. We're going to be defined more by how our community engages us, but more how we engage with our community. Does that make sense? So I want to make sure that that's in front of us. And we've been doing that for a while now. You just haven't really realized it. And we've been doing that as much as possible. We did an outreach event around Easter last year with a couple of other organizations, including the city of Clovis and another church. And so we're looking for those opportunities, but we always need other people to engage with us in those opportunities. And I'd like to take this morning just to refocus us a little bit on that mission that I spoke about, leading people into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. I believe that that is the biggest and most important thing that we can do together ever in all of history. I believe that. And so today I want to talk about just a passage, and this passage is from the Gospel of Luke, but this is the translation called The Message. And some of you might groan and go, that's not a real translation, because you're like really Christian and you know how all this stuff works. But I want to encourage you to go read several translations, which you can do for free on the Bible app at some point, several translations, and see what jumps out at you. I just feel like this, for today's purposes, the Message translation really jumps out a little bit clearer, a little bit more punchy, and helps us understand what's going on here. But first, before we get into that, I just want to explain something. Because Luke, modern scholars would say that he was somewhat involved in a medical field of some kind. He was maybe in the first century, considered something like a doctor. He was a very smart, educated Gentile, not a Jew. He traveled with Paul after he started to follow Jesus, planting churches, encouraging churches all along the Mediterranean rim. And he set it upon himself to create, to interview, to investigate through eyewitnesses, people who actually saw a resurrected Jesus. He investigated their stories, he interviewed them, and then he put them together in this document we call the Gospel of Luke. Does that make sense? Because oftentimes we just say, oh, from Luke, in the Bible, and you don't understand where that comes from or who that is. Luke's a real person, a Gentile, who wrote about Jesus and said, I believe this because I've interviewed all these people who saw Jesus die and who saw Jesus alive. I don't know if you realize this, but our faith does not rest on a book. Our faith rests on an event in history that's proven by eyewitnesses. So taking it to that level, it's really interesting and it's really awesome. The central theme and idea in this part of Luke's gospel is really about lost things. There's a bunch of parables, which are stories that are meant to kind of illuminate an idea and help people understand an idea more. They're stories that Jesus made up in his head. They may have had truth in some events, we don't know. They may have actually happened in some way, we don't know. But a parable is simply a story Jesus and other teachers used in this time frame to illuminate, to illustrate, to bring forth an idea that he wanted to get across. So here we go in Luke chapter 15. These are verses 1 through 7. By this time, a lot of men and women of doubtful reputation were hanging around with Jesus, listening intently. Pause. In his context, in history, a Jewish man to have people of doubtful reputation would totally stain everything he said. The religious leaders of his time would say, whoa, stop. Do you realize who you're talking to? You should be in the temple courts and you should be talking to people who are clean, people who don't eat bacon, You need to be talking to people who are absolutely good Jews. And here's what happens. The Pharisees and religious scholars, those guys who typically show up as the antagonists in the Gospels, the Pharisees and religious scholars were not pleased, not at all pleased. That's why I like this translation. Got a little, not at all pleased. They growled. He takes in sinners and eats meals with them, treating them like old friends. And you could kind of insinuate, how could he? Right? Their grumbling triggered Jesus to tell a story, to tell a parable. He says this, suppose one of you had 100 sheep and lost one. Wouldn't you leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the lost one until you found it? And some of us were like, well, I'm not sure. How much is the value of one sheep? Let's calculate this out. There's lions and things out there. In his time frame, big deal. Absolutely. You leave an obvious answer in his time frame with the people. Obvious answer is yes. Obviously, we go. We find the one. When found, you can be sure you would put it across your shoulders, rejoicing. And when you got home, call in your friends and neighbors saying, celebrate with me. I found my lost sheep. Sounds a little ridiculous, doesn't it? Like you just lost the sheep. You brought it home. Cool. Everything's good. You're going to throw a feast and kill a cow for this? That doesn't seem economically right. And that's Jesus' whole point. It's not economically right. Count on it. There's more joy in heaven over one sinner's rescued life than over 99 good people in no need of rescue. So when I say things around here happen one person at a time, that's why. Because every single one of us has immense value. And there are other stories that talk about our immense value and the value of one person who turns to follow Jesus. Talks about, killing the fattened calf, killing the most expensive thing that they have to feed a crowd of people to celebrate the turning of one person who decides to follow Jesus with their life. It's huge. There's more joy in heaven over one sinner's rescued life than over 99 good people in no need of rescue. It's huge. Jesus flips the ethic here. He doesn't say, hey, let's just have a holy huddle. You know what those are, right? A holy huddle is like people who follow God, and the only thing they do is gather together in a circle, and they sing their songs and pray, and they feel really connected with God vertically, but there's no horizontal anything happening for the people who are hurting around them. And God looks at that and he goes, love you guys. Great hearts. Turn those hearts out. Stop huddling and love other people. We often say around here, and Jesus replies to some Pharisees when they ask him what is the most important command of God. He says, love God with everything you got. And then he says this, the second command is like it. He's not saying the second command is secondary. He's saying actually the second command is equal to love your neighbor as yourself. We authenticate our love for God by showing love for our neighbor. And when we just show our love for God and we don't show our love for our neighbor, dare I say, are we really loving God? Are we really loving God, at least the way that he wants us to? When we serve one another, when we love one another, when we do something for someone else, when we put someone else's needs above ours, God is saying that honors me, and that is loving me just as much as them. That's what we're supposed to do. That's the Jesus ethic. To love one another to that extent. So he flips the script. And he shows the value of the individual and shows the value of the singular person who turns their life to Jesus. And I think that's amazing. And that's part of why we made a list of 100 names. That's part of why some of you are in this room. That's part of why we are so intent on creating relationships. That's part of why we have small groups. That's part of why we do just about everything we do. So for those of you who've been around a couple of years and have been a part of that process, thank you. That's a huge thing that you've done. You've impacted hundreds and thousands through your service. And you look around and you're like, how can that be true? Hundreds and thousands. It doesn't all happen in this room. It doesn't all happen in this room. It happens at events in the community. Happens at your workplace. Happens in your neighborhood. Happens at your kid's school. Happens all over the place. But you're loving people. And that's what Jesus calls us to do. So well done with that. But we're not done with that. We're just getting started. We're 4. My son Eli is 4. And he struggles with his speech, and I think we all do too. So we're still got a long way to grow, a long way to go. You know, it's cool. We don't have to wear diapers anymore. It's awesome. You know, our vocabulary is expanding, right? We're going to understand some different things together. But I can't wait to see what God's going to do this year and the years to come. See how he's going to grow us individually and collectively, and see what he's going to do through us if we will just stay true to the calling he gave us. Those 5 couples that I mentioned earlier that really launched the church and really started everything, we were just so convinced and so convicted that if we didn't do this, we'd be disobedient to what God had in store, what he wanted us to do. We still think that. And we're just expanding the team. We're just asking more people to be involved in that because we believe that that is the call of the church. To love our neighbors, to lead people to Jesus. That's the call of our God. That's what he wants us to do. So we're not done. There's still 1 million people, over 1 million people in Fresno County. Obviously, we don't reach all of Fresno County, but why not? Could. There's over 1 million people. There's over 500,000 just in Fresno. And you think to yourself, well, there are so many churches around here. Yeah. And there's so many people who don't go to them. There's so many people who aren't impacted by them. I'm not saying they're doing anything wrong. I'm just saying we need more. We need more. We need more. We need more people who are willing to follow Jesus into the messiness of our community. We need more of that so that we can accomplish more of our mission together. It all takes people. We need your help to reach our cities, okay? So we need your help to go find the one. We need your help. We need you to get on board with becoming part of that search party that really looks for those sheep that are by themselves. We could absolutely comfortably say, you know what? Let's just kind of fold into a large church and take on smaller roles and you know, all that kind of stuff. But we wouldn't be true to what God has called us to do here. He's called us specifically to do this. So we need to go find the one. We don't just gather, but we go find the one. We go find the lost sheep. So you say, well, in Jesus' story, I think that's Jesus' responsibility. Yes. But the amazing thing about Jesus is he chooses to work through his church. It's crazy. We're so messed up. I don't understand why he does this. But he says, you know what? My grace is so good and sufficient for you. I'm going to send you out. And at the end of Jesus' ministry, after he's been resurrected and he's giving final instructions before he's going to go to heaven, he says, you know what? All authority has been given to me. I give you all authority. Now go make disciples. Baptize people in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. And he gives us the authority and he gives us the charge. Go find the sheep. Don't just sit around together, though that's important. Go find the sheep. Love them. Bring them back. Bring them back to the gathering. Bring them back to the herd. And there will be much rejoicing in heaven. In fact, there will be more rejoicing every time that happens than when you just gather. There is extreme, immense value in the one. Jesus illustrates this over and over again. So, what I want to challenge us to do as a community, and some of you are like, well, I'm just here because it's like 4 years and somebody invited me. That's fine too. But if you are a part of Two Cities Church, I want to challenge you to be a part of our search party, to be a part of, I'll call it a brand ambassador, okay? So we need some brand ambassadors. And here's what I mean. I'll give you some real specific things. We need people to sign up to serve at Clovis Fest, okay? That's one. We need people to come to and invite their friends to that community concert I talked about on November 3rd. And we need people to get involved in giving, in serving, and loving inside the church and outside the church. Those are 3 things. Now there's a 4th thing that's not on the screen. For those of you who are like core, you're like, hey, I'm part of the core. You know it, you're here, you do things, you're involved. You're like, I would consider myself core. You've even gotten like an email from me saying that you're core. And you're like, really, I am? You are, trust me. So those of you who are really a part of the core, I want to challenge you because when we started the church, before we started, we did a series of videos and we used the hashtag We Are Two Cities. We continue to use that all over the place. But we did a series of videos that really highlighted those individuals, why they were part of this church, a little bit about their life, a little bit about their family. And we're going to be doing those again, partly to continue to introduce each other to each other, and partly to use that so that people who are sitting out there on social media looking at us and saying, one day I might go, because they exist. Trust me, I interact with them all the time. They can get a glimpse of who these crazy people are. And they can get to know who these people are and they can feel more comfortable with it. So that we're going to be creating these videos. They're just little vignettes. And our first shoot is this Wednesday with a specific couple. But if you want to be a part of that, or you're like, hey, I'd do that. Maybe you're like, I hate cameras. So that's fine. We blur your face or something. Just kidding. Defeat the purpose. Never mind. I was not going to go into it. Okay, so, but we'd love for you to be a part of that. If any of that interests you, if you're like, how do I get involved or sign up for any of those things, just write on a connection card, drop it in the bucket. You can talk to me, you can email me, but there's a number you can also text any kinds of questions ever or prayer requests. 559-797-1065. Save it in your phone. That's just the church line. You can text it. So you can text prayer requests, you can text questions, you can text, hey, how do I do this or whatever. Many times people are better at texting than email and phone and other things. So I'm going to give you that opportunity and that phone number as well. So what I'd love for you to do is just join our search party. Just join our core. Just be involved. Just say, hey, I want to be a part of that. I want to be a part of building that. I want to be a part of reaching our cities for Jesus. I think it's amazing that he gives us the opportunity and says, you know what? I want to involve you guys in that. I love your cities too. You love your cities. I love your cities way more than you ever will. But I want to involve you in that. I think that's an amazing opportunity we have. So let me tell you one more thing, just a quick little training, okay? Because many of us, we don't ever talk about or invite people to come to anything related to church because we're like, well, they're not church people. Well, for us, that's the point, okay? So we really, really, really love engaging with people who are not church people. Sometimes too much, sometimes more than we like church people. Just, happens sometimes. And you know what? We love engaging with our community. And so I want to give you three, we call them the cues to who, or we call them the three little knots. And these are three things you can use to kind of, as you're in conversation with someone at work, in your family, in your neighborhood, or wherever, these are three things that come up and your little antenna can go, oh, I should invite them to church, or I should invite them to this thing, or I should invite them to a conversation or a coffee where I can talk to them a little more deeply or ask them some questions. And here's the cues to who you may want to talk to about your faith. People, when they talk to you about how things are not going well. They're looking for some sort of answer. They're looking for some help in some way. So things are not going well. Or maybe they're not prepared for something, like their kid is graduating high school or just entering into preschool, or they're just about to have their first child, or they just had a family death or a divorce or something, and they're not prepared for the next season. They're not prepared for what's coming up. And so they're looking for something, and we can help them with that. Or the third one is just not in church. They're just not connected to a local church. And maybe they believe, maybe they don't. But they could benefit from being a part of a family like this, a church like this, a vibrant community that could help them develop into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ. Those are just three little cues to who you can talk to about this kind of stuff. So I want to give you that just as a short little training. For those of us who started this church, we stepped away from very comfortable situations, full-time jobs in ministry, and could have stayed there for a long time. And we stepped away without knowing what would happen, without knowing if we could make it, without knowing if people would show up, without knowing anything. And we continue to do that because we believe God's called us to something. And I want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to be involved in that. I want to challenge you to be on mission with us, together with us. We're not changing our mission. We're changing our understanding of some of our vision, but we're not changing our mission. Our mission is as it stands. We need to lead people into growing relationship with Jesus because it not only changes their life now, it changes their life forever, and it could affect an entire family tree and change the trajectory of that entire family. And that is huge. We believe God has called us to do that. So I'm asking you to consider being a part of that. Because we can do more, and we can do more better with more people committed to the cause. Let's pray. Father, we thank you that you just choose to involve us, even though many of us are sitting here going, who am I that I could even be here? Or who am I that you would love me, God? Or who am I that I'm worthy enough to be a part of something like that, or be a part of a vision like that, or be a part of what a local church is trying to do? But we all know we're not perfect, God, and yet you still call us and you ask us to be involved in something so awesome. We thank you for that. We thank you for calling those of us from the beginning and saying, yeah, go do this. And we thank you for the stretching faith that you continue to put in front of us and the stretching faith that lies ahead, God. You have stretched us so far. But we know you've got so much more in store for our cities, for your name's sake, which is above all. In Jesus' name.